Forget everything you thought you knew about Lord of the Flies. Today, I'll tell you a story that will flip your understanding of human nature on its head. This isn't fiction. It's the true story of 6 teenage boys who spent 15 months on a deserted island and built their own small, perfect society. If William Golding, the author of Lord of the Flies, had learned of this story, he probably would have rewritten his book. Because life sometimes creates plots that debunk the darkest theories about human nature. This wasn't a story about civilization collapsing, but about it being reborn, under the most unexpected circumstances and from the most unexpected materials. Picture this: the tiny kingdom of Tonga in the South Pacific, 1965. 6 boys, aged 13 to 16, Sione, Stephen, Kolo, David, Luke, and Mano, decided to run away from their strict Catholic boarding school. They didn't just plan to run off to the next village. They aimed to sail 500 miles to Fiji on a stolen fishing boat. Their escape wasn't an act of desperation. It was a surge toward freedom, a call of the ocean they had heard since childhood. They grew up on islands where every man is a bit of a sailor, where stories of their ancestors' great voyages were passed down through generations. Their supplies were laughable: 2 sacks of bananas, a few coconuts, a kerosene stove, and a childlike faith in miracles. But that was their secret. They didn't yet know that some things were impossible. Their naivety was their strength. When they sailed away from Tonga's shores that night, they had no idea they were heading for a true battle for survival. They thought they were sailing toward adventure, but instead found themselves face to face with their own selves, with their fears and weaknesses, but also with the incredible resources of the human spirit. The first 8 days adrift became a cleansing ritual for them. A storm carried away their sail and oars, waves overturned their supplies, and seawater ruined their last bananas. But it was during those days, clinging to the wreckage of their shattered boat, that they understood the most important thing. They would either swim together or drown together. There was no choice, only absolute interdependence. When on the 8th day they saw the black silhouette of the island of Ada on the horizon, it wasn't just rescue. It was a chance to start everything anew. What awaited them wasn't a paradise beach, but the black volcanic rock of Ada. The first days were pure hell. They drank rainwater from puddles on the stones, ate raw seabird eggs, and shivered from the cold at night in a cave they found at the base of the cliffs. But it was then that the amazing phenomenon of their friendship revealed itself. When Stephen found a single ripe banana, he broke it into 6 equal parts with mathematical precision. No one argued, no one demanded more. The instinct for fairness proved stronger than hunger. The first month was a time of despair and small miracles. They discovered that the island had remnants of cultivated bananas and taro, a legacy of the Polynesians who had lived there 100 years earlier. Every morning they woke up with one thought: today, we will be rescued. Every evening they fell asleep with one prayer: let a ship come tomorrow. But gradually, the rhythm of the island began to seep into their blood. A steady, eternal rhythm, independent of human hope. But gradually, despair gave way to acceptance. They began to build not just shelters, but a home. They constructed huts modeled after those they had seen in their home villages as children. They reinforced every hut together, crafted every roof as a team. There was a deep meaning in this. They weren't just surviving. They were recreating a piece of their lost world. Building became their therapy, a way to regain a sense of control over their own destiny. The second month brought an unexpected discovery. They found a way to create a permanent source of fresh water. Or rather, they created it. They hollowed out depressions in the rock to collect rainwater, connecting them with bamboo gutters. This was their first engineering victory, and it gave them something more than water: confidence in their own abilities. They realized they could not just adapt to the island, but transform it. The third month became a time for establishing a rhythm. They created a routine reminiscent of their school schedule, but without the coercion. They rose at dawn, said a morning prayer, gathered food, worked in the garden they had planted on terraces, took an afternoon rest, and sang songs in the evening. Kolo, the most musical among them, made a guitar from half a coconut, some wood, and strings from the broken boat. In the evenings, they sang Polynesian songs they knew from childhood. Those songs became a bridge between their old and new worlds. The fourth month tested their resilience. The rainy season began. Their huts leaked, and their taro supplies rotted. But it was then that they showed incredible ingenuity. They learned to dry fruit on hot stones and created a storage system using hanging baskets. Every crisis became an opportunity for a new invention. They found that the hardships that could have divided them actually united them, because solving them was more fun together. The fifth month brought their first serious argument. David and Luke quarreled over the division of labor. But instead of fighting, they called a timeout. They invented a ritual, 3 hours of silence, after which they had to shake hands and find a compromise. This became their first unwritten law. Amazingly, this law was born not from fear of punishment, but from an understanding that conflict was a luxury their small society couldn't afford. The sixth month showed their remarkable ability to learn. They observed the birds, understood their migratory patterns, and learned to collect eggs without destroying the nests. They learned to distinguish edible from poisonous seaweed. Their knowledge of the island's nature grew daily, and this knowledge gave them a sense of belonging to the place. The island ceased to be a prison and became a home. The seventh month became a time of spiritual exploration. They began holding not only prayers but also evenings of remembrance. Each took a turn telling stories about his family, about the traditions of his village. These evenings became psychological therapy, allowing them to stay sane despite the homesickness. They created their own folklore, stories about the island's ghosts, about the spirits of ancestors who watched over them. Religion became for them not a set of dogmas, but a living language for communicating with the world. The eighth month brought the trial of sickness. Stephen fell from a cliff and broke his leg. His friends didn't leave him. They made splints from palm branches, took turns watching by his bedside, and brought him the best food. After 6 weeks, he could walk again. Doctors would later say the bone had healed perfectly. But more importantly, during those weeks, they understood the value of human care. They discovered that compassion wasn't a weakness, but a genuine strength. The ninth month revealed the artists within them. They began decorating their huts with wood carvings, created a kind of chess set from shells, and even tried making paints from minerals. Creativity became their way of preserving their humanity. Their drawings showed no darkness or despair, only life in all its manifestations. Birds, fish, the sun, the ocean. Art became their testimony that they were still human. The 10th month demonstrated their organizational skills. They created a system of duties where chores rotated weekly so no one grew tired of the routine. They invented a council of 6 where everyone had a vote. Remarkably, in their small society, there was no single leader. There were different roles, but no hierarchy. They intuitively understood something that adult politicians often struggle to grasp. True democracy is only possible where there is mutual respect. The 11th month became a time for philosophical conversations. Sione, the most well-read among them, recalled history lessons, telling stories about Polynesian navigators and how their ancestors had settled the Pacific Islands. These talks gave them strength because they reminded them they were part of a great tradition of people who were not afraid of the oceans. Their loneliness diminished when they realized their connection to their ancestors. The 12th month brought an unexpected discovery. They figured out how to make fire by friction when their stove finally broke down for good. This was their second engineering victory after the water system. But more importantly, fire became a symbol of their independence from civilization. Now they could create warmth and light by themselves without outside help. The 13th month tested their faith. They had almost stopped scanning the horizon for ships. But instead of despair, a strange calm set in, an acceptance of their fate. They realized that if they were destined to spend their lives there, they could make them worthy. This acceptance gave them incredible freedom. Freedom from expectations, from the hope that had once tormented them with its uncertainty. The 14th month was a time of harmony. They achieved what could be called a state of flow. They worked in unison, understanding each other almost without words. Their movements became economical, their decisions measured. They learned to read nature's signs, predicting the weather by the behavior of birds, determining the presence of fish by the color of the water. The island ceased to be a hostile environment and became a partner in their survival. The 15th month began like any other. They no longer believed in rescue, but they weren't in despair either. Their society functioned like a well-oiled machine, where everyone knew their duties and rights. They had their own traditions, their own holidays, their own history. They hadn't just built a survival camp, they had built a culture. And then, on the morning of September 11th, 1966, Luke spotted smoke on the horizon. It was the fishing boat Just David under the command of Captain Peter Warner. When a tanned, muscular young man swam out to the boat and said, "My name is Stephen. There are 6 of us. We've been here for 15 months." The captain couldn't believe his ears, but when he saw their camp, their garden, their water system, he understood he was witnessing something incredible. Not just survivors, but creators. But the most amazing thing happened later. After they were rescued and brought home, it turned out that memorial services had already been held for them. And then, in a twist of fate, they were arrested for stealing the boat. The story could have ended tragically, but Captain Warner paid the boat's owner and proved that this was a story not about crime, but about courage. Later, he even hired them for his ship, and they became professional sailors. Their childhood dream came true, albeit in such a peculiar way. So what allowed them not just to survive, but to create a harmonious society? Perhaps the secret lay in Polynesian culture, where the concept of famili, the extended family, applies to all members of the community, or in the fact that they grew up in traditions of mutual aid, where the common good is more important than the individual. But perhaps it was something more fundamental in human nature itself, which, contrary to gloomy predictions, leans toward cooperation, not conflict. Yuval Harari in *Sapiens* writes that humans survived thanks to their ability to cooperate in large groups. These 6 teenagers intuitively understood what adults often forget. Our strength lies in unity, not in division. Their story is living proof that the capacity for cooperation is embedded in us at the deepest level. Their experience calls into question the Darwinian principle of the survival of the fittest. Maybe it's not the strongest who survive, but the most adaptable? And the greatest adaptation is the ability to cooperate, to empathize, to help one another. In their case, it wasn't the strongest or smartest who survived, but the most united collective. When Thor Heyerdahl was asked what he had learned about human nature during his voyages, he replied, that we only become human when we acknowledge our dependence on each other. These boys understood that without books or lectures, their society was built not on competition, but on mutual complementarity. Each contributed what he could and received what he needed. Their story makes you wonder, what really is civilization? Buildings, technology, laws, or something more? A certain way of interacting between people based on trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. If it's the latter, then these 6 teenagers created civilization in its purest form. Their experience shows, perhaps civilization isn't a thin veneer hiding a beastly essence, but the natural state of humanity. And when the artificial constraints of society disappear, what is revealed isn't always a beast, but sometimes the true human, cooperative, creative, compassionate. Maybe Lord of the Flies is the exception, not the rule, while the story of the Tongan boys is the rule we just rarely get to see. So what do you think? Could you create such a society? Or, left without laws and control, would you repeat the fate of the Lord of the Flies characters? What is stronger in us, the instinct for competition or the need for cooperation? Share your thoughts in the comments. This topic is worth discussing together. If the story moved you, give it a like and share it with your friends. Sometimes we need a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, we can remain human. And who knows, perhaps stories like this can help us build a better society right here and now, in our complex but beautiful world.